Good morning, Cindy.
Good morning, Dennis. How are you?
I'm great. It's so nice to talk to you. And several weeks ago, we had a chance of talking about taking your kid to college and what it's like for children in today's climate, of how it affects them, their peers, and trying something new, being away from home for the first time. I got a lot of great feedback on that. And a lot of people wanted to hear, well, what about the parents? I know you've gone through this. I know
I
I've been
have.
through it. We did it recently again for our rising junior, and it's always hard. And whether you have one kid, three kids, six kids, I think it just gets harder and harder, especially in today's world that we live in, Cindy, where we're a lot closer to our children than maybe previously our parents were, that generation, in general terms. So, with that said, let's maybe do an overview about being a parent, taking your kid to college, going through those run of emotions, going back home and looking at an empty bedroom and bawling because they're not there anymore, and cooking for two instead of three, and all the things that we've all been through and what it's like. And maybe just an overview of, I know you've talked to parents and you've experienced this personally yourself, about what it's like and the feelings.
Well, I think one of the things that it's like, especially for the first time, once you've been through it once, then it's not such a surprise when it happens again. But the first time, I think many parents are really caught off guard. Maybe they've taken their kids to camp before, or at the very least, your kid goes off to a sleepover to go to the beach with another family, or so you've had some partings likely, but we hope before college. That's certainly a recommendation. You don't want the first time your kids goes away from home to be college.
And I want to interject here because it completely took my wife and I off guard. And in fact, I'm not super emotional in those kind of areas, but I was hit very hard. We only have the one daughter, and I was excited about her opportunity, the school that she went to, and what she was going to do. But when I came home and saw that empty bedroom, I just lost it, and it was weird because, and I want you to expound on this too, especially for somebody that has an only child. The three of us are pretty tight, and I talked about, cooking for two, and your kid, our kid was there for 18 years, every day from she was born in our house, and now she's not. And it was really emotionally hard for several months. It really was.
Well, I think one of the things, because I also have an only child and one child, and I think that it's a big surprise about it can be a big surprise how it really feels that they really are gone, and that this parting feels like a much bigger goodbye. And it isn't that they're not coming back, or that you don't have your opportunity at Thanksgiving. That's the first time, or maybe even parent weekend before Thanksgiving, to see them soon, and that you're going to be seeing them. And there is this lovely time in American culture, and it's called college, where you do have this 4 years to get used to the idea that they're leaving. They're actually leaving home. And that bedroom, you know what? It eventually might become a study or something else. Or it might become, a guest room, because eventually they're not coming home unless they live somewhere else and come and visit you. If they're living in the area, they're not going to come home to their bedroom, we suspect. Now, having said that, I do want to put in the caveat: in this generation and with this financial climate and the difficulties with kids getting jobs right out of college, I want to totally normalize that it's not uncommon after college that kids do come home to live at home for a while. And that's normal. That's fine. Parents often are have mixed feelings about that too. And that might even be another topic for us sometime, what it's like when kids come home after college. But what I guess I'm just trying to say is there's an idea that you have, at least at the beginning. Oh my goodness, this is the beginning of the end. This is the beginning of them
Yeah.
really leaving.
Yeah.
And that is
It's
a really,
shocking.
yes.
Yeah. Well, I did want to talk to you about the coming back for the first time. I think that if you haven't read a book, or you have, there's people say this and that, and you parent your own way. But I've gotten this reoccurring theme that when you send your kid off to school, especially for the first time, you don't want to welcome them back to the home too soon so they can integrate and really acclimate to college and living on their own with roommates and adulting and all those things. So, is there a number, or is there anything you've talked about with families about when you should make sure that you keep your kid away from the house after you take him to school for so many months? Is there a handbook for that? Is there a right answer?
Well, look, I think a normal time to come home could be Thanksgiving. And it's not uncommon that parents do go up and sometime in the first initial period for some kind of a parent weekend, which is kind of a mixed bag because kids that are having some adjustment issues, which again is not uncommon because it's as weird for them as it is for us as parents. So they might be kind of chomping at the bit to come home for a weekend or something. And just like it's not that great to come home from summer camp for a weekend for the same kinds of reasons, you really do need to settle in and manage your new challenges in that environment. And so this is something where saying, I know it's hard right now, but why don't we set our sights on you're going to come home at Thanksgiving? I kind of think that that's often, depending on when college starts, when the college actually starts for a given school, it's like a 2 to 3 month period where they have a chance to get into their routine and those sorts of things. And that then they have some real stories to tell you by the time they come home.
Indeed. What about the kids that don't want to come home? How is that for
Well,
the parents emotionally?
well, that's a tough thing. And I do want to circle back for a moment, Dennis, to what we started with, which is let's remember you've had 18 years with this child
Mhm.
and you changed their diaper. You were up in the night. You sent them off to preschool. You went to their parent conferences. You went to the PTA meetings. You applauded for them at soccer practice and the recital and any number of other things. You lobbied for them with whoever about whatever issue. And we could go on and on, I'm sure,
Mhm.
between us.
Yeah.
But the
Yeah.
point is, you've been very much front and center in their lives. And now you're not. All of a sudden, you're not. So that can feel like an injury. And depending on what's happening in your life between you and between you and your partner, that can feel like a big or small injury. And if you have really rallied around your children and your children have been kind of the center of your life and you don't feel like you have enough of a life separate from your child, it can be quite devastating, in fact. And that is one of the reasons sometimes people seek therapy because they're saying, I was majoring in my kid, and now my kid went off to have their own major on their own without me.
Right.
And I'm
Right.
not in on their major anymore. And now I'm not in the line for pickup after school. I'm not, I'm not a back to school night for them. I'm here, doing my separate thing, and I'm a little lost. So
Yeah.
that's where the parent needs to be careful. And this is a really important part here, Dennis, not to bleed over onto their child with their own issues. That's a
Right.
critical point here
Yeah.
because what the issue is here, Dennis, is that if you don't know that you're actually sitting with a lot and that it's really actually challenging for you and that you feel a bit lost because one of your major roles in your whole life has just been taken from you, you could spill over onto your child and then interrupt what's a natural process for them, which is that they do need to separate from us. That is the natural order of things. And that in a way, parenting is a bit of a thankless job because they're supposed to leave us and we are supposed to be smiling and looking at them supportively as they do that. That's a lot to ask. We're all human,
It is. It is
you
a
know?
lot to ask. And I'm kind of curious, staying on that theme about the parents and when it eventually happens and they go, uh, you know, besides stalking them on their social media channels, or maybe you're blocked at that point and taking that personally, or if you use the Life 360 app and all of a sudden it's turned off there too because they want their privacy and adulting. What do parents do with themselves, partners, husbands and wives, husbands and husbands, all the people that have children out there? What do they do with themselves emotionally those first couple of weeks? Because there's a lot of emotions going through of the missing and the sadness and wondering what they're up to. And as you mentioned, we both have now the 18 years of knowing everything intimately, and then you don't. It's shocking to the system. It just is.
Well, I think the first thing is there's how you manage yourself, and then there's what you communicate to your child. So, for instance, you asked a minute ago about what about the kids that don't want to
Yeah.
talk to you, and
Yeah.
they might not for a while, and that might be I'm trying to do a little bit of stress inoculation as we start a new college school year. That might be okay. And maybe no news is good news. Maybe if they're not really wanting to talk all that much, it could mean they're really acclimating into their new setting nicely. And you might want to just let that be okay.
I
That
want to
doesn't.
I want to interject there. I want to interject because I personally have had times when our daughter has been calling us regularly because there's a lot of issues going on, whether kids, professor, doesn't matter what
Right.
it is. Then there were days where we didn't hear from her for a couple, 2, 3 days. And I asked my wife, who talks with her regularly, don't take it personally. I think she's actually having fun and integrating correctly. So the less we hear from her, I think the more she's adulting and having fun and having a good time.
Yes, I think that's right. And we don't want our children to feel responsible for us.
Yeah.
That's when it becomes a parentification of the child, which we don't want. We want them to just be able to enjoy their separateness and feel that confidence growing that they can manage it. And I think if you have this is another issue, Dennis, is very important. If you have a pre existing good relationship with your child, then you can expect that to carry through. They might back up or be a little different for a little while, but if they know that you're there, then they know that you're there. And if they didn't know that you're there, then you probably have more work to do during this period as you part ways to make sure they know that you're there. And that also, I want to put a fine point on this. It's not uncommon and can be really helpful to families if you're not feeling that connected to your young adult child going off to college, to make sure that you really take some time before they leave to really try to kind of clean up whatever is awry. And I wouldn't wait until the month before when you're spending your time at Target buying things. I would give yourself a nice big window, like maybe 6 months even before they go off to college. Now, some of you listening right now would be saying, well, thanks, Cindy. I mean, I didn't do that. So now what? So now what? So now you stay in touch and you say, I want to respect your separateness, but I also want you to absolutely know I'm here. Because if you haven't had a good relationship, then you won't know what that silence means. And that could be frightening, especially if your child has had some pre existing mental health issues or behavioral issues or whatever, academic issues. Then you might be thinking, I wonder how all that's going. And you won't know what it means because maybe they don't really share a lot with you. And also, just to normalize this point, Dennis, you know, it is normal part of development not to share as much with your parents. Your peer group becomes your peers, your age mates. And that's a developmental step of separation, which is needed as a young adult to be a healthy, functioning adult.
Something we also experience too, and it's just weird. I mean, the whole thing is awkward, uncomfortable, strange, and there's you can read every book you want to. Cindy's got great advice, and I love what she's talking about right now. But I will tell everybody, you can hear from Dr. Cindy Post, you can hear from me as a parent, you can read a book. Nothing prepares you for when it happens, and it's just real life experiences. With all that said, I want to go back and talk about something when it comes to communication. And this goes back to when I was talking to you about the teens' perspective when they go off to college and the difference between when they're in high school and how they're communicating with you pretty regularly. You see them all the time going to college. And that also changed for us too. And once again, our daughter's very close with my wife and I. So there's a lot of texting going on, photos and how she's doing. But, I'm curious about how parents, because we're talking about parents now, about how they react to certain situations. When it comes to texting or calling their children at school, you talked about leaving them be, letting them adult, but the parent also being curious of what's going on. So, how was your day today? That little text, or, would you like to call me after dinner? I guess you have to be careful about all those things and tread lightly. Maybe
Yes, you
give all
do.
the parents some advice in that situation about us communicating and initiating that communication while they're off at school. And maybe we haven't heard from them in a day or two and panic sets in.
I think that at the beginning, it might not hurt before they leave and they won't entirely know the answer. But you might want to start off by saying, hey, you're new at school here and you might be so busy that you don't feel like calling for a while. And I totally get that. Look, I want to know you're okay. And can we make some agreements and we can change them? We can have an eraser absolutely on the end of the pencil about what agreements we make. Can we plan that every Sunday night we're going to talk no matter what? And if that feels like too much, we can think about what else makes sense. And maybe at the beginning, we talk twice a week. But if you feel like, hey, mom, look, I'm really busy, or hey, dad, I'm really busy. I can't, I don't know that I'm going to get to it right now. Just let us know. Let's not make an agreement and have you not let us know. Let's let us know so that we understand what's happening. And most importantly, that we can count on it, that if something's really up with you, that you are going to let us know.
I'm going to spend a whole nother episode on talking about the helicopter parent generation
Oh
because
my goodness,
I'm
yes.
sure that Dr. Cindy Post has a lot of opinions and advice on that, and I'm part of it too. So I'm a 70s kid. I was brought up by my parents by just being let loose into the wild. That was their parenting,
Right.
and that's the way it was. It's so much different for now, but without getting too deep in the weeds about helicopter parents, I think that I'd like you to explain to our parents who are listening that just sent their kid off to college, whether it's the first time or maybe it's their sophomore, or even the junior year for me, about worrying about all the things that are going on campus, worrying about the things that they did, all the trouble that they got into in the 70s or the 80s whenever they went to school. And oh my gosh, my kid is going to run into that and I'm going to freak out. Am I going to hear from the cops? Am I going to hear from the president of the
I hear
college?
you, Dennis. I hear you.
Yeah, I mean, your head's going to explode thinking about all the things that you don't know that's going on. Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Well, I'm really glad you mentioned that because what we're talking about here, Dennis, is we're talking about the difference. This is really important between um, empathy and identification. Identification is what you just talked about. You talked about the idea that you did this, so you're worried maybe your daughter's doing this. Right. And so empathy is actually being able to see your child for who they are. Identification is not the same as empathy. When we're looking at our children through the lens of what we went through, no doubt our story was quite different than their story. So, we shouldn't presume anything and we should let them tell us what they want to tell us. And also, I think that there's a lot to be said at the front end, and this often helps calm and comfort parents and young adults. I'm calling them young adults aspirationally, but the other part is the mental health center at the university. Let me tell you something about that mental health center. Almost all universities these days, I do believe, have some kind of orientating program for incoming freshmen so that there's some kind of like drop-in meeting that they can participate in, that if they're feeling stressed or overwhelmed, that they have a way to reach out. And knowing your child is also really important. If your child has had pre-existing mental health issues or some other kind of issue, you may want to call ahead to the mental health center. You may want to have them set up some initial meetings. You might want to know in advance, when is that meeting? And then you also can talk with staff about, do you ever go and check on someone if a parent is concerned, just so the parents have an idea what's happening. Now, having said that, I should definitely make this point. Young adults in college have privacy. They don't have to share with their parents about their grades and about any number of things. And if you call professors directly, they often won't answer you because it's up to the student to do that. Students can sign forms allowing, I think it's called FERPA. So the FERPA is about academic stuff, and the HIPAA is about medical stuff, I think medical and mental health stuff. So they have to sign forms allowing you to have access to this information. And sometimes that can be really helpful so that you can help support your child in places where they might not feel comfortable telling you things that are going on. Sometimes kids are having academic difficulty or they're getting hazed by a sorority or fraternity and they're just not focused on their schoolwork as much. And if they're not careful, they can start deteriorating with their academic work. And this is a sad thing when this happens, and also unnecessary. So if parents can be aware what's happening with the grades or get the quarter grades, for instance, and they know their kid and are aware that something's up, they might be able to help intervene in some kind of important way. Having said that, back to helicopter parenting. At some point we have to, and this can really be quite an individual difference. Some kids you just ought to say, I know you're good, you've always been a good student,
Yeah.
enjoy your time, I look forward to talking more with you about it as you're ready to share different parts with me.
I want to talk one more thing about helicopter parents. And I want to share a story with you. I was on a Facebook page that has parents that go to my kid's school. They developed a Facebook page. I think it's great. They talk about restaurants and this is the pharmacy you can use, da 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 da. Pretty good information. But what also comes out of that is that crazy parent that says it's day 2. My kid doesn't have any friends. We don't come from a lot of means. She's at an expensive school and scholarship. She has no friends because of the money issue. And maybe not this specific thing that I read, but when it comes to parents that are freaking out over day 2 and that their kid hasn't made any friends at college and they're trying to let go, but then that helicopter thing comes back into play. What are your suggestions? I got to tell you, though, before you answer that question, reading the Facebook page and the comments can be super helpful at times, comical at times, especially for those first-year parents because they don't know what they're getting into. And then you can see the parents that have sophomores and juniors and seniors, they've calmed down a lot. But some of those first-year parents are just off their rocker about really micromanaging their kids, and I worry about the whole situation. Then they put it out in a public forum. A lot of people reply and saying it's going to be okay. That's, I guess, easier said than done. But maybe talk about the social media aspect and getting that feedback from your kid and then letting everybody else know that on day 2, my kid doesn't have any friends. What do I do?
Yeah, I think that parent needs support.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the fact that that kid doesn't have friends, some of it's the newness of a setting. Kids that are very popular in other settings sometimes find college, the newness of college and losing their entire support network
Yes, yes.
challenging. And
Yeah.
that's not uncommon. You could be very popular in one setting and then you move and you just feel a bit at sea. So,
Agreed.
and I think that social media can be a supportive thing, but it can also be a negative thing. And I guess I would encourage those parents to try to find people that they know and trust to talk to, because I think that, when you put something out into the air like that, well, there are a lot of pieces. One, depending on whether that's private or not, and whether the parent is sharing who they are and sharing about their child, then there are these random other people who know all
Yeah.
about your child, and your child might not appreciate that. That's
Agreed.
one thing. And
Yeah.
depending on how big or small the community is of people, like if it's on a Facebook page or something like that, and then everybody in the community knows about it, I guess I would rather see some of those conversations go on behind closed doors so that nobody gets injured by that. And also so that you can make sure that the feedback you're getting, like really look to your trusted others. I think parents really need to rally and come together and support one another and reality test some of these things. Like, look, if you've got a friend and who already sent their kid to college, that's great. I know I did that with some friends of mine that, they're just a few years older than me. And I said, did this happen to you? And they said, oh yeah, that'll be better in a couple months. And you just some grounded reality testing. And how did you get through that? Well, I developed a new hobby, I looked toward the good for what it meant for me and my husband, that we got to go away whenever we wanted. We didn't have to worry about, schoolwork and, when the school holidays were. We could take off at other times that we might not be able to.
Well, that's good advice. And I'm going to throw out something there that is going to crack everybody up. What Dr. Sidney Post just said, when you start making your own plans, you're going to a movie, you're going to dinner, you're going to the park, going on a bike ride, and your kid calls you and finds out that you're having fun without them, it is the most hysterical thing because it's how dare you have fun after I've gone off to college. I've got that several times, and she's a rising junior, and it is absolutely rip-roaring funny.
Oh, it certainly is, Dennis. And it's kind of like, you mean I'm not the center of your world anymore?
Yes, yes.
You mean your life has gone on without me? I mean, they do quietly want you to be well and not
Yeah.
worried, but then
Yeah.
they want to know you're still attached to them too.
They do.
That's the
They
other
do.
part.
Yeah,
Yes,
they do. And it's very funny. But also, I would say, and I'm sure you would agree, that it's very healthy because you talked about hobbies, about trying to stay busy. We all have our work lives. And whether you work out of home, the office, or you travel, I think with anything, if you have any kind of and Cindy, you can expound on this, but if you have any stress in your life, staying busy usually is the equalizer for at least getting you through the moment. And then, hopefully if you have a partner to talk about what you're going through, then you can chat about it maybe during dinner or something. But I would imagine you would recommend, especially if you're sending your kid off to college for the first time, to stay busy so you don't freak out all the time.
absolutely. Yes.
Well, listen,
Okay.
as we wrap up here, we've only got about maybe 3 or 4 minutes left. So maybe just a wide range. We've talked about so many things when it comes to parents sending their kids off to college for that first time. About other things that you've heard from different couples and your experiences about things that they can do, because this is fresh right now. I mean, kids were being sent to school this past week or two here. So this is fresh for a lot of parents that are listening to this, about what's going to be coming up over the next several days, the next several weeks, and how they basically navigate through these crazy waters and their feelings.
The first way is to know it's going to be a bit bumpy, and that people often fight right before they part because it's hard to say goodbye, and that just making a little bit more space and having a little bit more tolerance for them, understanding that people regress when they're under stress, and some of those regressing things aren't very appealing, and that it's just time to kind of clear your schedule a bit so that you can really be with them and support them and know how long to stay in the dorm room, setting up the dorm room, know when it's time to leave. Don't stay too long, but don't stay too short. So let yourself really be with them and embrace this journey and enjoy it and take lots of pictures and make it a happy thing. And know that you're going to have some wistful moments, and they will pass, and they will be replaced with other kinds of happy new discoveries of friends that you got to be closer to. And you developed even closer feelings, perhaps even with your partner, because your kid sort of is in the middle of all that when they're in the middle of all that.
Sydney, that's such good advice, because I think you would agree with this, and you probably talk a lot about this with your clients and your husband and your friends and everybody else. The human condition, no matter how bad it gets for us, allows us to move forward eventually. The sun comes up the next day, and whether it's a death in the family, somebody super sick, there's a tragedy going on, or taking your kid off to school, those moments are rough. But as each day moves forward, you start to grow a little bit, you start to heal a little bit. But I think the point that you're talking about is that you have to give yourself time to go through. And I guess it's like the different things of grieving somebody who passes. There's also the grieving of sending your kid off to college and all those different things that you have to go through to accept what has happened after the 18 years of this kid being in our house. Now they're no
Absolutely.
longer there, and you have to go through that process, don't you?
Yes, you do. That's right. It's a process. And it has a beginning, a middle, and end, like every process. And there are gifts and the challenges to every process.
All right, Cindy, before we let you go, for those who don't know and have heard Cindy over the years with Bernie, who used to host this show, and now myself, you have your own private practice. So if anybody is interested in maybe working with you, you can let them know what kind of different therapies you do, and then give maybe a web address and a phone number so they can reach out if they're interested.
So my website is cynthiapostphd.com. And my office line is 301-587-7551. And I work with young adults trying to launch, and I work with lots of family issues with adults and late teens and step families. And I do a lot of couples work and individual adult work as well. So, yes.
Wonderful. And Cindy, we have our next topic. It's going to be helicopter parents,
Okay.
because I've lived through, I don't know if you have, you and I are about
Uh-huh.
the same age. So I've
Yeah.
seen them. And, when you think you're one, but then you see those parents, you go, holy smokes, I don't want to turn into that.
Right.
We could probably talk for hours and hours, but we'll talk about helicopter parents. I know it has a negative association with it, but there are also some nice things that come out of that too, being
Absolutely.
close to your children. So thank you so much for your time, and we
Thank
really
you.
appreciate you joining us on Community DC. Thanks so much.
All righty. Take care. Bye bye.